The ancient oaks lining Alex's driveway whispered secrets carried on the breeze off Willow Lake. He'd inherited more than just land from his grandfather, Thomas. He'd inherited a sanctuary. 200 feet of pristine, pebbled shoreline, sheltered by a natural curve of the lake and dense stands of willow and pine, felt like a world apart from the manicured lawns and vinyl fences of Pinecrest Shores proper. The main house, a sturdy log cabin built by Thomas's own hands in the 60s, stood sentinel above the cove, its wide porch offering panoramic views of the shimmering water. This sliver of wilderness, Alex knew, was his grandfather's proudest legacy, painstakingly carved out before the HOA sprung up around it like opportunistic weeds. Grandpa Thomas, a man who valued quiet mornings with a fishing rod over neighborhood politics, had often chuckled about the deed in the lockbox. He'd shown Alex the faded, notarized survey map years ago, the thick red line clearly demarcating the private cove and its lakefront from the HOA's common property. "Bought it when it was just woods and water, son," he'd rasped, tapping the document. "They tried to swallow it whole when they formed, but I held the line. Always keep a copy handy." Alex took that advice literally, a photocopy perpetually folded in his wallet, another in the glove box, the original safe in a deposit box. He cherished the peace, the loon calls at dusk, the unfettered access to his slice of the lake. Yet, the shadow of the Pinecrest Shores Homeowners Association, embodied by its zealous president, Brenda Ackerman, periodically fell across his idol. Her patrols in her gleaming SUV were as predictable as the sunrise, her eyes sharp for any deviation from the HOA's voluminous, nitpicking bylaws. Alex had endured citations for the unapproved wildflower patch, native black-eyed Susans, deemed untidy, for his kayak left drying on his dock overnight, visual blight, and even for the excessive noise of his nephew's laughter during a birthday cookout. Each time he'd bitten his tongue, paid the petty fines if unavoidable, and complied politely, storing his defiance like dry tinder. He played the compliant neighbor, knowing the true power, the map, the deed, the legacy lay securely in his pocket, waiting for the day Brenda inevitably overstepped the boundary his grandfather had drawn in the earth decades before. The scent of charcoal and sizzling beef filled the warm air as laughter echoed across the sheltered cove. Alex's college friends, Maya and Ben, relaxed in foldable chairs on the sturdy wooden dock Alex's grandfather had built decades ago, cold drinks in hand. Their kids, Lily and Noah, shrieked with delight, splashing in the clear, shallow water near the shore, searching for smooth stones and minnows. Sunlight dappled through the willow branches, painting shifting patterns on the water's surface and the faded wood grain. It was the picture of summer ease Alex treasured, the lake gently lapping, the distant call of a loon, the comfortable hum of conversation punctuated by childish giggles. Ben flipped burgers on the portable grill perched safely on the gravel beach, while Maya handed out plates. Alex felt a deep contentment settle over him, the accumulated stress of HOA skirmishes momentarily forgotten in this shared joy on his grandfather's legacy. Suddenly, the peaceful symphony fractured. The sharp crunch of purposeful footsteps on the gravel path leading from the HOA common area cut through the relaxed atmosphere like a knife. Brenda Ackerman materialized at the edge of the cove, her posture rigid, her expression a mask of officious disapproval. Her bright neon HOA vest seemed to repel the dappled sunlight. She didn't pause at the boundary path but strode purposefully onto the damp sand near the dock, her polished loafers sinking slightly. "Halt all activity immediately." Her voice, loud and clipped, shattered the tranquility. Lily froze mid-splash, wide-eyed. Ben lowered his spatula. "This is HOA common property," Brenda declared, sweeping her arm dramatically to encompass the dock, the chairs, the cooler, even the kids in the water. "No unauthorized gatherings. No temporary structures. This requires a pre-approved event permit." She pulled out her phone, already snapping photos. "You are trespassing and violating multiple bylaws. Pack up and vacate this area now, or face immediate fines and potential liens against the property." Her gaze, cold and triumphant, locked onto Alex. The command hung in the air, sharp and brittle. Maya instinctively pulled her dripping daughter Lily close, wrapping a towel around her shoulders as the child's joyful shrieks dissolved into whimpers. Ben slowly lowered his spatula, a dark flush creeping up his neck. He stepped forward, positioning himself slightly between Brenda and the kids, his voice tight with forced calm. "Ma'am, there must be a misunderstanding. Alex invited us. We're just having a family picnic on his property." Brenda cut him off with a slicing motion of her hand, her phone still raised, its camera lens glinting like a cold eye. Misunderstanding? Hardly. Trespassing and blatant disregard for community standards. She snapped another photo, this time deliberately capturing the foldable chairs and the cooler nestled near the dock post. The shoreline, the water access points, the ambience, they are common property, governed by HOA bylaws. Your host knows the rules or chooses to ignore them. Her gaze, laser-focused and utterly devoid of warmth, pinned Alex. "You!" She jabbed her finger, the gesture violating the personal space of the peaceful afternoon. "Are responsible. Get these people off HOA land immediately. Every minute they remain compounds the violation. Fines will be levied. Liens will be placed if compliance isn't instant." Alex felt the familiar, acidic burn of injustice rise in his throat. The wildflowers, the phantom noise complaint, the kayak citation, a litany of petty harassments. But this was different. This was an assault on his sanctuary, his friends, his grandfather's legacy. The dry tinder of his stored defiance ignited. He took a slow, deliberate breath, the scent of charcoal smoke and pine needles grounding him. Instead of the usual placating words, a strange calm settled over him. He walked towards Brenda, his steps measured on the familiar pebbles, stopping just before the damp sand where her polished loafer had sunk. She stood, self-righteous and immovable, ankle-deep in his land. "Brenda," Alex said, his voice low but carrying clearly over the suddenly silent cove, the only sound the nervous lap of water against the dock. He met her furious gaze without flinching. "You need to take a step back, right now, onto the actual common property path behind you." He gestured with a slight tilt of his head towards the gravel trail a few feet behind her, the official boundary marked by a weathered post almost hidden by ferns. A flicker of uncertainty, quickly masked by outrage, crossed her face. She hadn't expected resistance, certainly not a directive. The confrontation had reached its precipice. The next move was hers, but the ground beneath her, literally and figuratively, was no longer solid. The silence that followed Alex's quiet command was thicker than the summer humidity. Brenda's eyes, wide with incredulous fury, snapped from Alex's calm face to the gravel path behind her, then back. "Take a step back?" she hissed, her voice regaining some of its shrill authority. "Don't you dare tell me where to stand. This entire lakeshore buffer zone is explicitly defined as HOA-managed common property in Article 7, Section B. Your dock permit is for access, not ownership." She planted her loafer deeper into the damp sand, as if physically claiming it. "This gathering is unauthorized. These structures," she gestured wildly at the chairs, "are impermanent eyesores violating Aesthetic Code 12.4, and you are willfully endangering community assets. Pack now." Alex didn't raise his voice. He simply reached into the back pocket of his jeans, the movement unhurried, deliberate. He pulled out a folded sheet of paper, its creases deep and white from years of being carried. It wasn't pristine. Coffee stains ringed one corner, and the edges were softened with wear. He unfolded it with deliberate care, the rustle unnaturally loud in the charged air. The paper, thicker than standard printer stock, held a photocopy of a much older document. He held it up towards Brenda, his finger tapping firmly on a thick, hand-drawn red line that snaked across a detailed survey map of Willow Lake's shoreline. "See this red line, Brenda?" His voice remained steady, almost conversational, yet it cut through her bluster. Drawn and notarized in October 1958. Surveyor was J.P. Henderson. Legally binding. He took a half-step closer, ensuring she could see the distinct demarcation. Everything lakewood of this line. His finger traced the boundary that ran just behind where her feet were planted in the soft sand. Including the precise patch of land you're sinking into right now, this entire cove, and this dock, he emphasized, tapping the map where the dock was clearly outlined within the red boundary, is designated private property. Specifically, deeded in perpetuity to Thomas J. Henderson, my grandfather, long before Pinecrest Shores HOA was even a glimmer in a developer's eye. It was explicitly excluded from the common property annexation in '72. He paused, letting the weight of the document sink in, his eyes locked on hers. You aren't just mistaken, Brenda. You're currently trespassing on my land. The transformation was instantaneous and profound. The righteous fire in Brenda's eyes guttered out, replaced by a dawning, icy horror. Her mouth, previously a tight line of command, fell slightly open. She looked down at her feet, half buried in the mud lakewood of the invisible boundary line she'd so confidently crossed. Her gaze snapped back to the map, scanning the faded lines, the unmistakable red boundary, the surveyor's seal, the date, irrefutable proof etched in decades-old ink. The clipboard, clutched like a shield, began to tremble violently in her hand. Her rigid posture, the symbol of her authority, seemed to freeze mid-collapse. The color drained from her face, leaving a sickly, ashen pallor. That can't, she stammered, her voice reduced to a choked whisper, devoid of its earlier power. The HOA records, the master plan, it shows. The sentence died, unfinished, swallowed by the vast, humiliating silence that had descended upon the cove. Her eyes darted from the damning map to Alex's unwavering gaze, searching for weakness, finding none. The ground beneath her, both literal and metaphorical, had dissolved. The silence that followed Alex's declaration was profound, broken only by the gentle lap of water against the dock pilings and Lily's small, confused sniffle. Brenda Ackerman stood utterly frozen, a statue of deflated authority planted in the mud of Alex's land. Her face, drained of all color, seemed to sag, the rigid lines of outrage replaced by a slack-jawed horror. Her eyes darted frantically between the damning map still held aloft and her own feet, unmistakably submerged lakewood of the thick red line. The tremor in her hands intensified, causing the clipboard to rattle against her HOA vest. Words seemed to physically choke her. The records, the master plan, it shows, she stammered, her voice a thin, reedy whisper, a ghost of its former commanding bark. The sentence dissolved into incoherence, swallowed by the vast, humiliating quiet of the cove. Her gaze finally lifted from the map to meet Alex's steady, unwavering eyes. She found no triumph there, only calm certainty and the quiet command radiating from a man standing firmly on his own ground. Slowly, jerkily, as if her limbs were rusted, Brenda took a shuffling step backward. Her polished loafer squelched as it pulled free of the mud. Then another step, retreating onto the dry gravel of the official HOA path. She couldn't look away from Alex, her expression a mixture of profound shock and dawning, sickening realization of the abyss. She just peered into the abyss of her own overreach and the legal quicksand beneath her feet. The clipboard hung limply at her side now, a useless prop. Alex lowered the map, folding it with deliberate care, the sound crisp in the stillness. He kept his voice level, polite, yet infused with an undeniable finality. Enjoy the rest of your patrol, Brenda. My guests and I. He gestured towards his friends, who were watching with expressions ranging from stunned disbelief to dawning, incredulous grins. We'll be continuing to enjoy my lakefront. I trust you'll ensure the HOA's official records and maps are corrected promptly to reflect the actual property boundaries. He didn't wait for a response. Turning his back on her, he addressed his friends, his voice warm again. Ben, I think those burgers might be getting a little too well done? Brenda didn't speak. She simply turned, her movements stiff and robotic, and walked back up the gravel path towards the common area. She didn't look back. She seemed smaller, diminished, the neon vest suddenly garish rather than authoritative. Word of the confrontation spread through Pinecrest shores with astonishing speed, fueled by Maya and Ben's gleeful retelling. Brenda Ackerman resigned as HOA president less than 3 weeks later, citing unspecified, personal reasons. Alex's subsequent lakeside gatherings became legendary for their relaxed atmosphere. The only sounds interrupting the peace were laughter, the splash of friends diving in, and the sizzle of food on the grill, blissful proof of his grandfather's foresight and the enduring satisfaction of knowing, truly knowing, the boundaries of his own sanctuary. The day the HOA Karen froze solid on his shore became a whispered, satisfying legend.